Dark Souls is a game that came out in 2011. That's right, 15 years ago. Time really flies. I'm a huge fan of these games. However, I had never been able to experience a title that started one of the most influential trilogies of the last decade. I began with Bloodborne, then played Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, Demon Souls, and Elden Ring. I was worried that Dark Souls mechanics might have aged poorly and I wouldn't enjoy it. So here's my opinion in 2026, 15 years later. I'll start with the good things, then move on to the bad, and finally wrap it all up with a conclusion. Has the game aged like milk or like fine wine? How was Dark Souls as a first-time player? First of all, let's start with something that I absolutely love in these games, the atmosphere. Dark Souls lives up to its name. It is dark, and arguably the darkest entry in the trilogy. The way the game uses lighting, sound design, and visual effects to create its world is truly outstanding. I also love the lore. It's very interesting to me because I played Elden Ring before I played Dark Souls 1. Thanks to this, I can see how much inspiration Elden Ring took from here. The fight between gods and dragons, how the most powerful god uses lighting to end the war with them, the world is slowly fading and losing its essence. All those themes that I love in Elden Ring were actually created in Dark Souls 1. And it's awesome. Very creative, with a lot of depth and different interpretations. I think that it works even better here because you can actually see that the world is dark and decaying, instead of the vibrant and colorful places in the lands between. I gotta say, the graphics still look surprisingly good for a game that is 15 years old. There were moments where I genuinely felt like I was playing Dark Souls 3. Everyone knows that these games are known for its cutting-edge graphics or animations, but their art direction is on an entirely different level, especially in the first half of the game. You've probably heard people complain about the second half of the game. We'll talk about that later, but I really want to praise the first half for its incredible locations. The Undead Asylum works well as a tutorial area. The Undead Burg feels like a truly abandoned medieval town. The forest has a mysterious, almost mystical vibe, and Firelink Shrine is my second favorite hub area in the series, thanks to its calm and melancholic music. What really impressed me is how Firelink connects to so many different areas. I had always heard that Dark Souls had the best world interconnectivity in the series, and honestly, they weren't exaggerating. It's incredible. The sheer number of areas that loop back into one another and the variety of paths you can take to progress still blows my mind. Early on, I headed toward the Undead Burg, but I didn't even realize I had skipped what most players consider the intended path. I never fought the Capra Demon, the Moonlight Butterfly, or the Gaping Dragon. Somehow, I managed to defeat the Bell Gargoyles, ring the first bell, and then descended to Blighttown without encountering several bosses I was supposedly meant to face. I reached this nightmare of an area through Firelink Shrine, down the elevator, up the stairs, across the Valley of Drake's Bridge, and finally into Blighttown. Seriously, the freedom this game offers without being an open world is phenomenal. I love that feeling of being completely lost. Truly awesome. The gameplay itself is also very solid and doesn't feel nearly as outdated as I expected. It is slower, yes, but that mostly comes down to learning the timing and adjusting your playstyle. That said, the rolling definitely feels dated. I'm very used to what they call the omnidirectional movement, and in Dark Souls you can only roll in 4 directions. This makes movement feel clunky at times, at least for me. Dodging also feels less fluid compared to the newer Souls titles. Still, with enough practice, you can adapt. It's just something that stands out when you come directly from modern Souls-likes. One feature I really appreciated, and that's mostly missing from newer entries, is boss runbacks. I genuinely enjoy learning level layouts and discovering shortcuts that make repeated attempts easier. While I do like having a checkpoint right outside a boss arena, I really miss that sense of tension and discovery here. The fear of running out of flasks, planning the safest route back, and conserving healing for the actual fight adds a unique layer of anxiety that I love. This design works particularly well because of the kindling system. For those unfamiliar, Dark Souls allows you to consume humanity to kindle bonfires, increasing the number of Estus flasks you receive up to a maximum of 20. This is extremely useful in punishing areas like Blighttown, where you will burn through healing while fighting enemies, dealing with poison, and eventually facing the boss. And trust me, you'll need those flasks, because this game is tough. Even as someone who has played nearly every Souls-like, I still found Dark Souls incredibly challenging. Maybe not always for the right reasons, but we'll get to that in a bit. I really appreciate how different this approach is. Instead of slowly upgrading your healing capacity with items, the game lets you heavily invest in bonfires you know will be crucial. When it comes to bosses, this is where Dark Souls feels the most divisive. Almost every boss fell clearly into the good or bad category. Now keep in mind, I'm judging these fights within the context of Dark Souls' own gameplay, not comparing them to Dark Souls 3 or later titles. Many encounters rely heavily on gimmicks, but unfortunately, some of those gimmicks just aren't good. Fights like the Moonlight Butterfly, Ceaseless Discharge, and of course, the Bed of Chaos fully deserve their negative reputation. That said, there are some fantastic bosses too. Ornstein and Smough, the Bell Gargoyles, and the legend himself, Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. One major issue that I had with some fights is the hitboxes. Some enemy attacks are clearly poorly coded. You'll see moments where you take damage that simply shouldn't happen. Still, I'll give the game credit for boss variety. Most encounters feel unique, which adds a lot to the identity. However, none of the base bosses truly reached the top tier status for me. That honor goes entirely for the DLC. Every fight there is excellent. Starting with the Sanctuary Guardian, Calamite, Artorias, and Mana's Father of the Abyss are all incredible from both a gameplay and design perspective. This makes sense, and I would take it as compliment since the DLC was the last content developed for the game. And it really goes to show how much From Software had learned by then. I definitely want to make a dedicated video about the DLC. Subscribe so you don't miss that. And speaking of the DLC, this brings me to one of my biggest issues: how unnecessarily confusing and overly complex many things are. So many core mechanics like humanity and kindling are barely explained, if at all. Even as someone familiar with the series, I found this confusing. For a new player, it must be overwhelming. How are you supposed to know that you need a specific ring from Sif's Arena just to fight the 4 kings in New Londo? These design choices make the game harder, but for the wrong reasons. Today, we can rely on YouTube guides. But imagine dealing with this back in 2011. The DLC access is another perfect example. To reach the Artorias of the Abyss content, you need to kill a random enemy in Darkroot Basin, then defeat another enemy in the Duke's Archives, then return to the garden, talk to an NPC, reload the area, etc, etc. It's absurdly convoluted. Even now, constantly having to look things up online just isn't fun. Now, I won't dwell on this too much since it's been discussed endlessly, but the second half of the game isn't as strong as the first. That said, I don't dislike all of it. I did enjoy the Duke's Archives and New Londo ruins. My main problems were with Lost Izalith and the Tomb of the Giants. These areas aren't bad because they're difficult. They're bad because they're tedious and frustrating for the wrong reasons. Blighttown is a great contrast. I hate it, but I respect it. It's meant to be miserable, and when you die, it usually feels fair. Dying because you cannot see anything or are forced into unavoidable situations is a different story. Another major issue is the lack of fast travel for most of the game. You only unlock it after defeating Ornstein and Smough, and I really didn't like that. While the interconnected world is amazing, curiosity can actually work against you. I wandered into Blighttown far too early and had 2 choices: push forward while under-leveled or attempt to climb back out. Trust me, I tried to climb back up so many times. It was incredibly frustrating, and failing repeatedly made me feel punished for exploring. This problem could have been easily solved by allowing fast travel from the beginning. You could still explore freely, but also retreat if you reach an area where you weren't ready for, like I did with the Demon Ruins. Or imagine if you want to upgrade a weapon with Andre, you need to go all the way back to Sans Fortress without any fast travel. Lastly, I want to mention damage output. This might be just a personal issue, but for the longest time my attacks felt underpowered. I tried several weapons early on, and enemies constantly felt like damage sponges. The Iron Golem in particular gave me a lot of trouble. I struggled to stagger him no matter how much I attacked. I understand how stats work in these games. My damage felt lacking for most of the early game. Again, this could just be me. Let me know in the comments if you felt the same way. The moment we've all been waiting for. How's Dark Souls 1 in 2026 as a first-time player? Despite its flaws, it is absolutely worth playing. While the late game areas can feel rushed or poorly designed, everything up till Ornstein and Smough is phenomenal. The bosses may not be the best in the series, but the DLC more than makes up for it. I also understand that it's the first in the series. It wasn't as polished because they straight up didn't have as much experience with these games. Even like that, there are some legendary fights that are so iconic and made this game famous. The world interconnectivity is still unmatched, and getting lost in these early areas is an unforgettable experience. Imagine how good this game has to be in order to make someone like me, who has experienced most of the games, still get blown away by things like the level design, even when I've heard about them countless times. Just imagine how strong a game has to be to include areas like Lost Izalith and the Tomb of the Giants and still be considered a masterpiece. The gameplay is slower and demands patience, but if you're willing to endure the struggle, Dark Souls 1 delivers some truly incredible moments. The freedom and feelings this game can achieve are impressive. The lore and the relationship this title has with depression is so good. I get why it's changed so many people's lives. This game is awesome. I think in a way I even liked it more than I liked Dark Souls 3, and that's saying something. Because of the maps and the world building, if you were to make a game with the level design of Dark Souls 1, with the bosses and combat from Dark Souls 3, that would be peak gaming right there. Best game of all time. But hey, that's my opinion. Have you played Dark Souls 1 recently? And if so, what do you think about it? Has it aged better than you remember? Would you like a remake? For me, it aged incredibly well. Let me know your opinion down in the comments. Don't forget to hit the like and sub if you enjoyed. It would mean the world to me. And if you like Dark Souls, I'm pretty sure you're gonna love Bloodborne. I just made a video on it, so I'll leave it here in case you want to check that out. Come on, I know you want to. As always, thank you so much for watching. I am the Valley Knight, and I'll see you in the next video.